So, are young men in crisis? Well, according to psychologist Philip Zimbardo, the answer is a big, resounding yes. In his book, The Demise of Guys, he makes a pretty bold claim that a record number of young men are, and this is his phrase, flaming out, both in school and in their social lives. So, in this explainer, we're going to break down the arguments and the evidence behind this really provocative idea. And this quote from author Warren Farrell, man, it really sets the stage. It tells us it's not just a gut feeling that something's off. We're talking about a major historical reversal. Think about it. This is the first time in U.S. history that sons are on track to be less educated than their fathers. So the big question is, why? What's going on here? Okay, so to really get a handle on this argument, we have to start with the data. The book kicks things off by looking at the effects, the hard numbers that paint a picture of what they're calling a widespread struggle. And this problem apparently starts really early, like back in elementary and high school. According to the National Center for Education Statistics, boys are getting the vast majority of DNF grades, a whopping 70%. And it doesn't stop there. They're also 30% more likely than girls to drop out of high school. That's a huge difference. And this gap doesn't just disappear after high school, it actually gets wider in college. Just look at this chart. Back in 1970, guys were earning over 60% of all college degrees. But fast forward to 2010, and the numbers have done a complete 180. Women are now earning the majority of degrees at every single level. We're talking bachelor's, master's, and even PhDs. Okay, so we've seen the effect, we see the numbers, but what's the cause? Well, now let's get into the book's central argument, which is this, that young men are being pulled away from the real world by the super powerful allure of digital entertainment. And this next number, well, it's really at the heart of the whole issue. Get this. According to the research in the book, the average young person will have spent a staggering 10,000 hours playing video games by the time they hit 21. 10,000 hours. Now, to put that into perspective for you, earning a whole bachelor's degree takes less than half that time, around 4,800 hours. So we're not just talking about a casual hobby here. This is a massive, massive investment of time and energy, one that completely dwarfs what it takes to get a college education. It's like a whole new world is competing for their attention, and it's winning. So the authors argue that this leads to a new kind of dependency, and they've got a name for it: arousal addiction. Now, this isn't like a chemical addiction, it's neurological. The idea is that the brain literally gets rewired by the constant stream of new, exciting stuff from video games and online porn. And what happens? Well, the real world, which is a lot slower and more complicated, just starts to feel boring, unfulfilling even. And this, right here, is the core conflict. In the virtual world, you get instant gratification, right? You can beat a hero, you can master a skill, and there's basically zero risk of real social rejection. But the real world? School, jobs, relationships, that's all built on delayed gratification, and it's absolutely filled with the constant risk of failure. So, which one sounds more appealing? Okay, but it's not just about the pull of video games. The book argues that this retreat into virtual worlds is happening because, at the same time, there are these huge shifts going on in the real world. Think about the foundational pillars of a young man's life: family, school, and the economy. The argument is that they're all under serious pressure. Let's start with family. In the U.S. today, a full 40% of kids are born to single mothers. And the book really zeroes in on widespread fatherlessness as a major factor here. About a third of boys are growing up in homes without their biological father around. That means a traditional source of male guidance and mentorship is just gone for a lot of them. And then there's the school system, which the authors argue is also failing boys in a few ways. For one, you've got these old school analog classrooms that just don't mesh with these digitally rewired brains. This mismatch might be why boys are getting diagnosed with ADHD at 4 to 5 times the rate of girls. And then at home, you have the rise of helicopter parenting, which, wraps kids in bubble wrap and prevents them from learning how to fail, and more importantly, how to get back up again. So on top of all these social changes, young men are also facing a totally new economic reality. The classic path to adulthood, it's not just socially tricky anymore. It's become financially terrifying in a way it just wasn't for their dads or granddads. I mean, this chart really says it all. Look at the insane climb since 1970 in the average price of a house and the cost of college tuition. They're skyrocketing. Now, see that other line that's barely moving? That's median household income. It just hasn't kept up. For a lot of young guys, those classic milestones of adulthood are just becoming financially impossible. And this viral image called Man's Math, it's a joke, obviously, but it taps into a really cynical feeling out there. It kind of equates women with time and money, and then money with problems. It's a funny way of showing a very real anxiety that the traditional path, family, commitment, is just an economic trap waiting to happen. All right, so you combine the powerful pull of the digital world with all these intense real-world pressures we've been talking about. What do you get? Well, according to the book, you get a whole new set of social behaviors and psychological challenges. The book coins this term the new shyness. And it's important to understand this isn't your classic fear of getting rejected. It's something deeper, a fundamental social awkwardness that comes from a straight-up lack of practice. I mean, after spending thousands of hours online, a lot of young men just don't know the basic playbook for face-to-face interaction, especially with women. Which, of course, brings us to the big question. How does all of this affect romance? What's the impact on dating and relationships in this new social landscape? Well, the book's own survey, and they asked over 20,000 people, gives a pretty clear answer. The vast majority of people believe that excessive gaming and porn are strongly linked to two things: emotional immaturity and just a general lack of interest in starting or keeping a real-world romantic relationship. The book also puts forward this really fascinating theory they call social intensity syndrome, or SIS. Here's the gist. It's the idea that some men start to subconsciously prefer the vibe of all male groups. High energy, low intimacy environments like a sports team, a frat, or an online gaming squad. They prefer that over the much more complex, subtle, and high intimacy world of being in a romantic relationship with a woman. Okay, so let's zoom out. If all these trends keep going in the same direction, what does that actually mean for the future? The book wraps up by looking at the potential long-term impact, not just for guys, but for all of society. And this isn't just viewed as some personal problem. People see it as a national one. A pretty shocking 70% of the people surveyed believe this whole trend will hurt America's ability to compete on the world stage. They're worried that our young men just won't be as innovative or as capable as their peers in other developed countries. And that brings us to the book's final, really provocative thought. It's adapted from an old African proverb, and it kind of asks us to think about the ultimate stakes here. If a village doesn't initiate its boys, will they burn it down? It's a powerful and pretty chilling question to end on, making you think about the consequences for everyone if a society fails to guide its young men into a positive, productive adulthood.